What is up YouTube, and welcome to this French Dispatch video. It's the latest movie from Wes Anderson, and I was pleasantly surprised how much I like this movie. My favourite Wes Anderson movie is Rushmore, and sadly the latest flicks did not click with me, but I was in love with this movie from start to finish. The set design was particularly the standout, especially during the story of the French students, and the performances from the cast delivered as you would expect with actors of this calibre. I know this movie has been out a while, but I've only just had the chance to watch it as it dropped on Disney Plus in the UK last week, and I believe is out this Friday on HBO Max. It's a shame I didn't get to see it at the cinema, but the short release windows have been a welcome relief, with Last Duel and Kingsman also coming to Disney Plus in the UK pretty darn quickly. The movie stories follows the French Dispatch of the Liberty, Kansas Evening Sun, or simply the French Dispatch. I did think it would be a sort of newsroom dramedy, but what we got was an anthology dark comedy, and maybe it was so gripping as we switch stories and even visual mediums over the course of the movie. Oh man, TikTok has ruined my brain. Now, the editor of the French Dispatch, Arthur Howitzer Jr., here played by Bill Murray, a longtime collaborator of Wes Anderson, passes away and uses the final issue of the magazine as his obituary. He started the magazine after moving to a small town in France, and the publication grew in size to reach hundreds of thousands of subscribers. It is inspired by The New Yorker, a similar style, culture and lifestyle magazine, and is a love letter to the journalists that have had an impact on Wes Anderson over his life. The stories and journalists portrayed in the movie are based on real life ones, and I will explain that a bit more when I get to their respective stories. The final issue of the magazine has 4 stories and a traditional obituary for the editor at the end, which is how the movie is set up and is very clever. The final issue is very, very Wes Anderson here, as the guy who died, Howitzer, said that he wanted the last issue to be published when he died, so the magazine ended as his life ended. It's very Wes Anderson, like others have said, but very, very accessible in my opinion for those not really into Wes Anderson movies. I know that sounds contradictory, but hey, it's just how I feel. Another frequent collaborator in the Wes Anderson movies, Owen Wilson, has the first story, which is entitled The Cycling Reporter. It focuses on the fictional French town Ennui-sur-Blaze that centres on the passage of time in a town. It's the shortest of all the stories and is based on reporter Joseph Mitchell of The New Yorker, who was the inspiration for Owen Wilson's character, Herb St. Sazerac. He rides around town showing how the town has changed, and while old buildings are replaced with new styles not fitting the style of the area, much like gentrification in the UK and US, the people still congregate in the same places and nothing really changes, just the looks. The next story, The Concrete Masterpiece, does focus on an artist who has been incarcerated for a very long time. It is narrated by J.K.L. Berenson and based on the real-life art writer Rosamund Bernier, who conducted similar presentations at the New York Met. It is also, in my opinion, the most gripping, as we see Moses, an artist who killed 2 men, locked up and approached by the art dealer Julian. Julian wants to move into modern art himself and was locked up for tax evasion. He heads to meet Rosenthal to negotiate some of the art to be sold to him. You can see that the artist is simply down to earth and just wants prison currency cigarettes, but Julian, like most rich guys, blinds him with money, shows off, and Moses is just down to earth. Julian creates an entire backstory for him and wants to tell his life story, sell a book, and also kind of create and manufacture hype of the art, and is simply a critique of modern art, which is hyped and lambasted sometimes for not being perceived as real art. Now, it's also a story about exploitation, as Rosenthaler has been in prison for a very long time and seems to have zero interest outside of his muse, Simone. He's currently making his art as well. Julian exploits him to be trying to turn him into the next big thing and doesn't get that the artist's process and just wants to milk him for his art. Julian and his uncles do become entitled, demanding more and more art, and the art is eventually airlifted out. For his help during the riot, the artist is released and maintains contact with Simone. It's a sad story that turned what he loves into monetary gain. The third story, Revisions to a Manifesto, follows Lucinda Crements as she documents a student revolution based on the real-life writer Mavis Gallant, who wrote The Events in May, a Paris notebook for The New Yorker, and just like Lucinda, she was also an unwanted outsider looking at the events. It's also based, like I said, on the real May 68 general strike and student protests against capitalism, the government and American imperialism that brought the economy to a halt to try to bring change. The French are hardcore when it comes to protest, shame us Brits aren't the same. The students were being tired of downtrodden and wanted simple demands as the journalist gets close to her subject, the charismatic Zeffirelli, played by our boy Timothy Chalamet. The story focuses on journalistic integrity as while she tries to become neutral, the pair end up sleeping together and she even helps proofread his manifesto. She gets far too close to the subject, ever influencing its actions instead of simply observing. Eventually he goes with the young girl after a bit of weird love triangle, but tragically passes away after trying to fix an antenna on a pirate radio station. Now the final story, The Private Dining Room of the Police Commissioner, felt like the longest as we see Jeffrey Wright playing Roebuck Wright recounting his encounter with a police officer who loves to cook and serve haute cuisine, having dinner together, but it was interrupted when the commissar's son is kidnapped. It started off discussing the chef but moves into a kidnap caper. The story caps off the articles and is another example of the writers making the story about themselves, a theme of the movie, with even the first story being recounted at a seminar, while this one is on a TV show and is mainly about him while the chef is forgotten in lieu of the exciting adventure. The kidnappers, led by the chauffeur, want a prisoner dubbed the Abacus released, and we learn how Wright was employed by the magazine after he was bailed out of prison for being homosexual by Howitzer, the editor. Wright recounts how the subject of his story was sent after a shootout to cook for the kidnappers, only to end up poisoning them. Try as Wright might, the subject of the story comes back to the focus. It's a tale of finding yourself in another country, as the editor and Wright discuss a quote that was cut saying, "Seeking something, missing something left behind" from the chef. Lastly, the movie ends with the writers creating an obituary, and it's funny how we hardly saw this impressive group of actors, but overall, it was a pretty superb movie, and I really, really enjoyed it. It is an ode to the journalistic integrity in a world where everything is just simply for clicks. These really lovely, painstakingly made stories are what we need. But that is it for this video. Please drop a like down below to subscribe with notifications on, and I'll see you soon, and goodbye.